All right, LaTasha Morrison, author of the
Yeah.
new book, White Spaces, Confronting Systemic Racism to Bring Healing and Restoration, and most importantly, a beautiful Enneagram 9. Welcome to Typology.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to see you again. We actually, we mentioned earlier, shared a stage at a conference about
Yes.
2 or 3 years ago
Yes. Yes.
and had such a wonderful time. And when I saw your name come up, I'm like, get LaTasha on the show.
So good. I'm so grateful. So grateful.
All right, let's talk
Yeah.
about you're an Enneagram 9, and I've seen you in action. I mean, you're a very compelling, passionate speaker. And I want to talk to you about your journey of coming into your own voice and your own life with so much power. But
So
let's just
good.
begin about how you understand life as an Enneagram 9. Like tell us about how you learned about the Enneagram and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I first heard about the Enneagram several years ago when I was doing which next gen work and dealing with family ministry, youth ministry type stuff. I'd heard a couple people mention it. There was a training at an event that I went to. I think it was maybe a friend of mine named Jeannie Stevens had done some work around it or was talking about it. I had no idea what it was. Like I was just like, and everybody knew. And I was kind of like faking it, like, okay, what's that? And then I was on staff at a church and we actually took the test and they did a leadership training around it. And so that's when I kind of understood it a little bit more. But I've had having coming up in ministry, being on staff at, a couple of different churches, like we did a Myers-Briggs disc, the disc and all of that. So it was kind of like one of those things where with the disc, a lot of people that I was on staff with, it was, if they were a D, what you call a driver, they would just say, well, I'm a D, I'm a driver. No, and I'm like, no, you're rude. Like, and so it put some things, no, you're just being mean, like it put some things, kind of put a wall up with the test, I think, it helps you be aware of who you are or how you're showing up, but it's not an excuse to mistreat people or to especially lean into the negatives of that. But it's good for self-discovery, when you're trying to figure out like how I work, how I show up. And then I had some strength training and all these different things that I've done. And so when it was time for the Enneagram, I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand how it was different. And then at that point, I still wasn't quite understanding all of it. But then something kind of clicked in me, becoming a leader and working with different people on the team and looking to have synergy, understanding, compatibility, different things. So we started seeking out some various things to do that. We did that as it relates to our communication styles, and then the Enneagram was actually one of those that we did. And we actually do that for everyone that we hire, just kind of giving us a guideline. And I like the difference in the Enneagram because it's not a personality test, and that was helpful for me to kind of understand. It's, really about discovering who you are, and it just connected with our team deeply. We've done some trainings with this guy named Milton, and even some of the justice sides as it relates to the Enneagram work. And that's been really enlightening and really helpful for our team. And for
Mm,
me, it helped me to understand who I am better, not just about how I'm showing up, but who I am as a person and the things that kind of make me who I am. Because I'm different, as it relates to just leadership style. I'm a little more diplomatic. I'm compassionate. I'm caring. There's some things where I didn't see myself as a leader because I wasn't like, maybe I'm a go-getter in my own way, but I'm not boisterous, like just some of the things that sometimes you think about, especially when I was younger, think about as a leader.
yeah.
And then with the Enneagram, it helped me really discover who I am and really help helps me to highlight some of those assets,
Yeah.
like where when I did not want to be an Enneagram Nine, because when I saw it, I was like, they lazy. I'm not lazy. Like, am I like? But the more I read about it, I was like, oh my God, I am definitely a nine. And so a lot of people don't know that about me, but those who are really close to me, they know that they recognize that nine.
Yeah.
But when people see me on stage and they see me in an event or something, they're like, oh, is she a nine? Or, but I know how to really dial back. you know and then I have this eight wing. There's still a lot that I don't understand, so you'll have to school me on some of those things, but I have like a eight wing. I'm very justice activism oriented. That's I've been like that since I was a young girl. As I look back at the patterns and threads of my life, the person that I am now, I've always been that, and I've always been a leader. So outside of, what I do, I know that, I'm a change agent, I'm a leader, and I'm a bridge builder,
So I think this is
regardless
so
of what
great.
I'm doing.
I love this because I don't think nines think of themselves as leaders or change agents as often as they should. I know tons of nine leaders. I know tons of
Uh-huh.
nines doing good work. Now, again, I want to remind people you've written two books. The first was Be
Yes.
the Bridge, which was a way of challenging Christians to become active participants in the work of racial reconciliation, right? Then now this new book, Brown Faces, White Spaces, confronting systemic racism to bring healing and restoration. This is written by a nine.
I know.
Now nines, you are not known for necessarily this kind of energy, right? Like
Yeah.
you would hear that book title and you think, oh, that's an 8, that's a 3, that's a
Uh-huh.
7, that may be a different type, but not nine would not be your first guess, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now nines have a deep need for inner peace and harmony. They
Yes,
want
me
to
too.
preserve and protect inner peace and harmony in the outside world. But I saw you step into a space with 120 rich white people, many of whom probably were defensive and not happy about this concept that maybe there's a racist system out there. And am I
Yeah.
getting that right? Would you
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so you're stepping into highly conflictual, very charged environments where maybe people don't like you from the at the start. They do by the end. Trust me, everybody. But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, how natural is that for you as a nine?
Sometimes it's not that I don't think about it. I counted the costs when I started this. That was one of the things that I was reluctant about, because when I walk in a room, I do want people to like me. And most of the rooms I walk in, people are either unsure of me, they sometimes are intimidated, or they are afraid, or they don't like me because of maybe something they've heard or read, or anything like that. Because doing this work, you've been called everything, a Marxist, everything. And then when people kind of meet me, they're like, oh, wait a minute. I like her. She's nice, whatever. And so I think some of that is just, I only know how to be Tasha. And this work, the reason why I do this work is because of a deep love that I have for God's people. And that's the driving force.
Does it take a lot of energy for you to gear up for that kind of thing emotionally?
Sometimes I try not to think about it as much, because it could become like a stumbling block. I like to know what I'm walking into. And at that time, God rest his soul, Mr. Rick Woolworth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's a good friend of yours who um, that I had an opportunity to talk with before stepping into that space. And he had such a big, loving heart, and he was really leaning into this conversation. And I was walking also into a place who had done during the pandemic. A lot of the groups, the mentoring groups, had done these cross racial, cross cultural conversations from materials that we've created with Be the Bridge. And so I knew I wasn't walking into a space where people didn't know anything. At least they were open. And if you're open, and if you love Jesus, and you're open, I feel like I'm walking in some good ground, that I can do
Yeah.
something with that.
And the group it's a great group, but it is predominantly a white, highly educated, successful group of folks. And it was at a time when I think there was so much energy around this topic and so
Yeah.
much defensiveness. And this is back when, White Fragility, that book was huge, and everybody was on edge. And George Floyd had happened more recently, and people were just, there was a lot of energy, as there still
Yeah.
is, right? There still is, but it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
particularly hot right then. And I just think it's so wonderful because when you did speak, I think you really disarmed people so quickly for two reasons. This is what I remember. Because you're a 9 and you didn't come in with guns blowing. You came in with love, as you said, and with kindness and with compassion. That I think everyone was like, "Oh, you're not what I expected."
Right.
Like I think everyone was expecting, you know, something much more in your face and hard hitting and
Right.
shaming, and and very not divisive, but you know, I think that's what they were expecting. But what they
Yeah.
got was this beautiful, open-hearted, and very biblical. Like that was the other thing. It's like, well, you can disagree with me, but as I understand it, it says this right
Yeah.
here, and I think
Right.
it's like between being like a wonderful student of scripture and having that 9 energy where it's like, let me just invite you, which is a different way of saying, let me just confront you. It's different than that. It's this kind of, we have a problem. Not
Yeah.
I have a problem. We have a problem. It was so
Yeah.
beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I
Yeah.
really credit that to a 9. Okay. Now, in the book, you talk about 9 spaces or
Mhm.
sectors of American life where systemic racism is still flourishing. Okay. So, number one, just give me a 2-sentence definition of systemic racism as you understand it.
Yeah. This systemic racism is where our institutions have been basically set up to allow one group to win based off of race, which is a
Mm-hmm.
social construct, and to oppress another group. And so that's just in its simple terms is we have systems like schools were created where my parents, my grandparents couldn't attend, but your parents and grandparents could attend, which created a systemic issue as it relates to education, housing. So, that impacts wealth, healthcare, all of those things. And so it's basically a system that has been set up to allow a group of people to have progress and growth and another group not. That's in simple terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look back over the history of America, we can see that, through the institution of enslavement, genocide, the things where those things were set up because, and those are just things we just can't deny, about our history is that, there was a point in this country where you and I wouldn't be able to have this conversation. Or we wouldn't be able to share lunch together or go to the movies together. And I think the most sad part about is that there's a point in our history where we wouldn't be able to go to church together and worship together. And those are true facts, and that has created a system that is systemic in the sense when we look at gaps in education, gaps in as it relates to wealth. When we talk about medical things, all of those things play into systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I talk about, I say confronting because I do believe as a bridge builder, one of the most important things as a bridge builder is we have to have a foundation of truth. And we should know that as Christians, it's the truth that makes us free, And so that is the foundation of our faith is truth, And so I think that is something that we have to understand. And I think for me, it's kind of like one of those things. I think you can give truth um, also at the same time grace. And we have these t-shirts and Be the Bridge is like truth and grace, and those there's a balance with that. And I think that is what my personality is even outside of this work. And so sometimes Ian, I like Like sometimes I want to be that one that just comes and just blows it up. Sometimes you feel like that on the inside, but it's not who I am. And so I've had to embrace my style and who I am. And I've gotten a lot of flack, sometimes from people who do this work and, how I do the work, but realizing that just even like different pastors, different voices are going to reach different people. And so I'm not going to reach everyone with my style and my voice, but somebody else may reach another group of people with a different style and a different voice. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It's just different. We're called to reach people in different ways, And so I've had to embrace that uniqueness about who I am and understand it, that this is the way God has wired me and that it's an
Yeah.
asset.
So let me ask you a question that I'm really curious about. I've read some articles recently about, that race is a social construct.
Right.
Okay. And that if we eliminate race as a construct, that would go a long way toward furthering justice. What are your thoughts about that?
We would have to have a reckoning first before you can do something like that, because we have denied and deflected, the impact of racial injustice for so long. So now to say, okay, race no longer exists. Now that's kind of like what we're doing now, like this whole colorblind approach that started in the 70s, where okay, we're going to treat everyone the same, and we're not going to, acknowledge race, when that's really a lie. That's not starting from a place of truth. The first thing you're going to recognize when I walk in a room, I'm going to know that you're a white male, and you're going to know that I'm a black female, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to see color. Now, where it becomes a problem is if we start treating people differently. If I start treating someone unfairly or unjustly, because of what I see and I'm not recognizing it. So there's some things that we deal with consciously, and then there's some things that we deal with unconsciously. So when we start talking about this social construct, we would have to have a major reckoning of justice and equity first before we can kind of, say, okay, now are we where we used to be? No, we've come a long ways, but we could be a lot far further. And I do believe that we have taken steps back over the last, 5 or so years. There's been some steps
Mm-hmm.
where I think people are fatigued, exhausted. But I always check in with people. I said, if you're tired and fatigued about hearing about it, tired of talking about it, just imagine those of us who have to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I wish I could put my head. I was talking to my staff. I said, I wish I had the privilege just to put my head in the sand and just bury it for the next 10 years or so. But I don't have that privilege to do that. And so I believe that my life depends on it, or the future generations depends on that. And so I think that is something where I wish we didn't have this system. This is a man-made system. We know, of course, that God created the human race. The Bible talks about nations and tribes. We understand that. So this is a broken, sinful system, but it is a real system, and it has real benefits, and it also have real consequences, lived consequences. And so I think it's one of those things where, outside of America, me being African American makes no sense at all. Outside of America, someone saying that they're Asian American makes no sense at all. So that shows you how broken the system is. Just everybody that's Asian, you become Asian American. It doesn't mean that the culture from as it relates to being a Vietnamese and from Thailand is totally different. But in America, you become Asian. And this is the thing when people say, like this system doesn't matter, like everyone's treated equally and equitably, and but one of the things we have to realize that this is a real system. When we are born, what do we have to put down? What do we have to document? When you're born, one of the first things that goes on your birth certificate, other than your name and your gender and your weight, is also your racial category. When you get married, What is the first thing? One of those things that goes on that marriage certificate is your racial category. When you leave this earth, the other thing that goes on that death certificate is your racial category. We have created an entire system around someone's race in this country,
Hmm.
because just like I am not truly African American, like it makes no sense. You're not really a white American either,
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And we have to understand the history of when that started happening and why wasn't everyone just called Americans then? And
Right.
everyone was not called Americans because we wanted to create an hierarchy and a system where there was people on top and people on the bottom. We could have just said, "Hey, you're in America, now you're all Americans." You know, I see Rwanda has done that, with having, I talk about this in the first book, having tribalism, where they have this ethnicity, different tribes that people are from in Rwanda. And it would be on their driver's license, on their birth certificates. But after their genocide, everyone now are Rwandans. But there is a whole constitution set up to support that,
Yes.
you know,
Well, and they
system.
had the worst of reckonings.
Yes.
I was there in 96.
My
And
gosh.
I'll tell you, like nothing I've ever seen before
Yeah.
and hope I never see again. And that's the worst kind of reckoning that
Yeah.
leads, same thing in South Africa, right? There was a reckoning of sorts but there, in the truth and reconciliation work. But America has not had that experience. Now,
We had it somewhat with the Civil War, but we
kind
still
of,
denied the narrative around that. Yeah, we
yeah,
didn't really. It was like
yeah,
a lot of people say, "Oh, it was about economics and states' rights," and I'm like, "But what did the states want to do?"
yeah,
Let's think critically. What did the states want to do? And then let's look at and what did the states say? We actually do this in our training. We actually have people read, the different states that seceded, like read those papers and to actually state it, what they were stating. And, most people, although it's, you know, the internet is free. Most people had never seen it or never read it. We just say it was about states' rights. So we haven't had a reckoning like that. I would hope that it wouldn't take that. You look at Rwanda, which was 93% Christian, and having a genocide like that. But think about the missionaries and the type of theology that created that. So they had very wide faith, but it wasn't very deep. When you look at South Africa, you look at Dutch Reform, that kind of was a part of that. In each systems, the reckonings that you see in various countries, Christianity is at the core of that. It doesn't like that type
it's
of depravity in
heartbreaking.
Christianity. It's kind of like it's hard to swallow, but I think we have to really look at that and ask the questions, some critical questions as to why and how does a loving God that tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves in some of these beliefs that we're seeing, that we've seen across the world, even the
Yeah.
Holocaust. Yeah.
So, all right. So you've got these 9 places. I'm fascinated
Uh-huh.
by this, right? You got
Okay.
education, healthcare, the justice system, the
Uh-huh.
economy, the military, property ownership, entertainment, sports, and the church, right?
Right.
Now, of those 9 categories, which one really concerns you most? Where does your attention migrate most often to?
I would say education because it's the outworking of all the others,
Hmm.
and I think because if we are educated on the truth, if we are, and it's not to say, this is the thing, no one is the total of the worst things that they've done. None of us are. We are not the total of the worst things that we've done. And I think there are things that people have done in history that are horrible. And I think we tell the truth about those things, but there's also room to tell other stories too,
Hmm.
And I think we try to reshape and change a complete narrative with leaving out all the negative things and then putting people on pedestals and basically memorializing them without considering the impact that it has that history has done on generations of people rather than say these are the things that this person done, because there's a way to teach that too. There's a way to teach. There's some people that have changed as it relates to history, and there's some people that took their last breath and did not. And so I think there's some learning from that. And so I would say education, because it's impressionable. It is where we would see change in the sense of when we talk about the military, because you're training in the education system, you're training future leaders that are going to be in these other spaces. So you're training future pastors, you're training future generals, you're training future doctors, future actors. So I think education is key, and that's why we see this attack as it relates to, in a lot of states as it relates to the school system.
So you talk in the book about how, Jesus's act of reconciliation on the cross leads to human liberation from oppression.
Yeah.
So speak to that.
Yeah. I think one of the, we talk about, God has given us the ministry of reconciliation, and speaks of this in Corinthians. But that is, the blood that Jesus shed, reconciled us back to God. And therefore we can be reconciled to one another. And so that was the outward showing of true demonstration of reconciliation. And I think that is key, because if anyone should know how to do this work of restoration, redemption, it is the people of God. And so I think that's just really key and important that Jesus shows us the way in that.
Yeah. So then I would imagine, tell me your thoughts about the state of Christianity in America today, and particularly in the way it expresses itself through the lens of Christian nationalism.
Yeah, I think it is a heresy, because it puts country in the place of Jesus, and it breaks my heart, you know. And the fact that we haven't learned anything from that, anything that divides or sets us apart from one another based off of categories, is antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this in scripture when we look at every example that Jesus used. Is something about the least of these. The people that were, detested, or people who were seen as an outcast. He talks about the widow, the foreigner, the orphan, in that historical context, in the ancient Eastern context. And I think there's something that we can learn from that when, at the core of white Christian nationalism is indifference. And indifference is not hate, but it's basically saying, when you say, and the reason why I'm saying white Christian nationalism, because that's very important to identify that. And when you say Christian nationalism, it's like we're pledging to our country when we're saying we're ambassadors of Christ. We're no better, as ambassadors of Christ, as Americans. We don't have this hierarchy. We don't have this American supremacy to say that we are better than those in Germany, or we are better than those in Spain, or we are better than those in Mexico, or we're better than those in Iran because of where we were born. None of us controls where we are born. None of us controls that. And we're not better. So what does that say about Christ, who came to die for all? For God so loved the world. For God so loved the world. And Christianity is not an American thing. Christianity is a world thing. It's a global thing. These are our brothers and sisters that are in Iran. These are our brothers and sisters that are in South Africa and in Spain and all across this country. We don't own Christianity. And what Christian nationalism does is say that we are better, that we're superior, that we're supposed to control, rule, and reign. And, and the only one that's supposed to control, rule, and reign is Jesus. The only supremacy that we should embrace is God's supremacy. And I think we have forgotten that, And when you look at it, you look at scripture and look at the examples that Jesus gave. Look at the Sermon on the Mount. And if that doesn't shake you and change you, you have to ask why. And so I think that's, for me, is the driving force, because we're trying to make Jesus something that he's not when we embrace Christianity. You're making him a God of indifference. You're making him a God that shows impartiality. You're making him a God that did not die for everyone.
Hmm.
And
So,
so I think that's just
yeah.
important to remember.
So how do we create systems where everybody gets to flourish?
That's a great question. I know that it starts with truth. And I know that it really starts with a different type of dogma and theology. Like, I know that there has to be some, what you would call some deconstructing and some reconstruction on what we've come to believe that is truth. But I think it starts with, when you think about this, Christianity started with a few. Jesus didn't convince all. There was a remnant. And look at us today. We are here because of that remnant. So all didn't believe, but even through the midst of disbelief, the gospel spread. And I think what we have to do is continue to stand for truth, no matter what the cause, and really demonstrate the love of Jesus, no matter what the cost,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the Spirit of God that convicts and transforms. And I think that's the thing that we continue to do. I'm looking at this, just this example we see, in Scripture and the New Testament, and just really trying to continuously live that out, But but I do believe that to create a system where all flourish, it starts with truth, and it starts with repair. It starts with repair. That's
Beautiful.
key.
Yeah, well, everybody, we're talking to my friend LaTasha Morrison, author of Brown Faces, White Spaces, Confronting Systemic Racism to Bring Healing and Restoration. It dropped in May. And the foreword by a guy who's also been on our show, Eugene Cho.
Yeah.
And it's all about equipping readers to engage more deeply in rooting out the systems that perpetuate racial disparity.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful that it's written by a 9. Right. I mean, it's like this is what I'm talking about when people live into their giftedness and their type,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful because you bring the spirit of, let me just, in a way, what I witnessed in your speaking, right,
Okay.
was you, how can I say this? You brought the kids medicine in a, right, that doesn't taste very good, in a way that they were all like, "Oh, that's okay." You know what I mean? Like I don't. It's a 9 thing, like the
Yeah.
ability to do
Yeah,
that, right? Like you brought truth, but as you said, right, truth and grace. It was truth sweetened with grace.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting this metaphor
I
entirely
think you're
right.
getting it. I've heard this before. A friend of mine, she said, when I hear you, it's like I should be mad at you, but it's like I want to hug you. And
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think I do believe that that's just God. And another friend said, she said, it's like it's like this dance you do where it's like you're hitting someone in the face, but you're also rubbing them on the back at the same time.
Yeah.
And she said, and you're like, she said, and I'm confused. I'm like, I want to be mad at you, but then you're smiling. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. I have no idea. But it just tells me that, I- you know, and it took some time for me to acknowledge this and receive this, that of being uniquely gifted for this work because, this is difficult work. These are hard conversations. And so there is a daily struggle that I have of not wanting to do this type of work,
That's what I was asking about if you had to
yeah,
gear up for that talk.
yeah. Like once I'm
Mhm.
there. And it's like, I feel like when I look into that audience,
Mm.
even sometimes I have people, and I don't know if I did this when I was at Telemachus, I'm not sure. But if I told people to look at your neighbor, or when I look at people, and sometimes I say, I love you. And I mean it from every part of my being when I say that. And I feel like, the Spirit of God does something with that in people. Like people, your spirit recognizes truth. And I think in authenticity, and so I know like, and sometimes like I am even outside of this, like I feel like I'm a naturally funny person, and so I know humor can also disarm, but it's also a part of my personality. Like I've gotten that from my father. My grandmother was a hoot. My grandfather was a hoot. My aunts are hilarious on my dad's side of the family. I come from a very comedic type family. And so I know how to also use humor in disarming, but also telling the truth, and then also trying to be like, I think when I came to Telemachus, I don't know if I can't remember if it was 2021 or 2022. I can't remember. I think it was 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But I came also in 2022. I cannot remember.
I can't either. I've done so many of those
I
conferences. I
know
can't.
I can't. Whatever it wasn't long. I lost my father to COVID.
It
And
was right
so,
after that.
yeah. And so it was that same year. I think it was the end of 2021. And I think I kind of shared from
Mm-hmm.
that. And sometimes I'm really honest about, I know you guys are looking at me like you scared of me, but I should be the one. I'm the black girl in the room with all the white faces, like, and so that's kind of like if anyone should be afraid, it should be me, And so sometimes just even saying that, just saying the quiet things out loud
Mm-hmm.
is disarming, but I think it opens up a pathway. And we've also spent some time with people. Like when I come into an organization and I'm speaking, like I really, want to see the best for the people in that room. Our team have spent time. We went, on the Sankofa experience, the historical experience that the organization went on. We were invited on that. Like, so it's, I really genuinely care about people, and I pray my heart stays this way. My daily prayers, Lord, keep my heart pure. You continue to fuel it with love, because it's real easy, sometimes rightfully so, to sometimes become bitter. Um, and it's not to say I don't have my moments. And I'm walking through a season of discouragement now, but still I try to see people the way Christ sees people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just keeping Christ at the center of what I do and what I say is just really key. And that's the thing that really guides me. Cannot do this work apart from Christ. Like I
Mm-hmm.
cannot. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot.
Well, everybody, we've been speaking with my friend again, LaTasha Morrison, author of Brown Spaces, White Spaces, Confronting Systemic Racism to Bring Healing and Restoration. LaTasha, tell people where they learn more about Be the Bridge and all the good things that you're doing.
Yeah. You can learn more about Be the Bridge at bethebridge.com. You can also follow us on all the socials, also LaTasha Morrison. What we're trying to do is we're really trying to empower people and culture towards racial healing, racial equity, and racial reconciliation. And that's not an easy task, So I like to tell people that what we do is we create resources and dialogues to help people grow in racial literacy, and that's what we do
Love
as
it.
an organization.
And I
So
can
yeah.
tell people, having seen you do your work firsthand, it is legit. It is serious,
Oh,
and
it's so great.
it is good. And I just, again, like knowing there's something in me that's just thrilled that you're a 9 doing this work, because I think part of what the success of your work is born out of this this there's an actual personality trait, and I'm going to
Okay.
tell you what it is.
Okay.
And it's a word that I love, and it's actually a word that I would use with Rick, our mutual
Huh.
friend. The word is irenic. You know that word?
No.
Irenic, irenic, and it means aiming or aimed at peace.
Mm.
So it's actually a part of Christian theology that is all about reconciling different denominations and sects.
Okay. Okay.
But it's actually an adjective that you can use describing a personality, like so and so. I'd say LaTasha has a irenic personality, and an
Okay.
irenic personality is what 9s have, and they have this ability to really call us into our best selves in a way that disarms, and I just love it. I love watching it in
Yeah.
action.
Yeah, are the fact that I'm a 9, like a lot of times people like to have conversations with me because it's like a unique 9 in the sense in the work that I'm doing. But do you think it's real odd, like as a 9 leading this type of work? Am
I don't know if
I,
it's
a unicorn?
Yeah. No, I don't know if you're a unicorn. I don't think so. I mean, lots of 9s are brave, and lots of
Right.
9s are courageous, and lots of 9s have done enough work on themselves that they are not so needing peace and tranquility and harmony, and they're not so needing to merge with the values of the group.
Yeah.
They've reached a place where it's okay to upset the apple cart.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
just how you
Yeah.
upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, but it's not often that I've had a 9 leader on doing work that you're doing, because it's so highly charged
Huh.
and highly conflictual in
Yeah.
many people's minds, right? And
Right.
highly in many people's minds, highly confrontational work.
Right.
It's just not something a 9 would typically gravitate toward, work that a 9 would
Yeah.
gravitate toward.
Yeah.
That said, you can, and when you do, you bring particular gifts to the equation that make that work even better.
Okay. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
how I would
Yeah.
say. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say unicorn. I'd just say interesting.
That's good. Yeah, and those are the things that, because of my desire to have peace and tranquility, sometimes like those are some of the things that I have to recognize, even now, like I was telling you, like sometimes I want to put my head in the sand. We're realizing that I can't do that. I'm realizing that, this is a different season. So I know that I have to do a lot of work on myself oftentimes to that helps me be able to do this work continuously and grow in this work and write books like this. Like for me, I know like writing this was exhausting.
Mm,
Writing this book like depleted me. And so I know I don't rebound like everyone else rebounds.
hmm
So I have to understand that I have to take breaks. I have to, take some time out because of the type of personality I have. To stay refreshed, I have to have joy in my life. I have a beautiful friend group, great family, so all of those things play into that. And so, I know I don't do social media like everyone does social media. And so because I have to be able to disconnect and I post a lot about my dog.
Yeah,
I post a lot about my dog.
I
But
love
some of
that.
that, yeah, and some of that is because also this work is not the whole of who I am. And so I have to and that's okay. So I've had to like continuously find my voice. But I think, just as you mature, I think, I started the process of finding my voice in high school, in college, and in various ways. I could see those, what you would call life points, where that led up to the things that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And because of that growth makes it this a lot easier now, but it doesn't make it completely easy. So
Yeah. Well, LaTasha, thank you so much for
yes,
being on the show. We
thank
love,
you for
love,
having me.
love what you're doing. Anthony, I
Yeah.
love, love, love me some Anthony.
Yes.
Brother.
And your eyes are better, Anthony,
Yes, yes. Oh
Good,
man.
good.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh man.
Thank you.
Well,
And the
listen up.
baby is here now.
Right,
My
right.
goddaughter,
Fantastic.
she's here.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. So she's not quite a month old. She was born in December the 20, I think the 21st or something like that. Yeah. I probably need to get that birthday down pat, right?
Probably.
It's
That's
around
Okay.
funny.
around that time. Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
everybody, listen up now. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have rest. Until next time.
Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. So happy to have you here today, folks. We got another great interview with LaTasha Morrison. She is an Enneagram 9, and she has a brand new book. Let's see. She is an Enneagram 9. She is an Enneagram 9 author. She is an Enneagram 9 author of the award-winning New York Times bestseller, Be the Bridge. And she has a brand new book out called Brown Faces, White Spaces, Confronting Systematic Racism to Bring Healing and Restoration. We have a great conversation with LaTasha. So glad you're here. We talk about how she does the work that she does, which involves a lot of confrontation, albeit she does it in a beautifully accessible way, but it still is a tough subject matter, and she still is a tough subject matter. And we ask the question, how do you take on such a challenging topic that involves a lot of confrontation, even in public speaking? And even though public speaking and leading the charge with healing and restoration as an Enneagram 9. So this will be really interesting for you all. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner. So glad you're here, folks. Let me throw in, hey, also remember Ian's book, The Fix. Make sure you go Ian's book, The Fix. It drops in the next few days, but you can go to Amazon right now and pre-order. Make sure you do that. Hey, that's it for me, Anthony Skinner. Glad you're all here. And now it is time for the man of the hour, Ian Crum.